Hi everyone, myself Arshin Shabir. Today I am here with the new topic of discrete mathematics, graph theory. So let's see what is graph. A graph G is a mathematical structure consisting of two sets V and E, where V is known as non-empty set of vertices and E is a non-empty set of edges. There are two examples of graph. Here we can see there are two vertices V1 and V2 and one edge E1. So this is a graph. And second example, there are five vertices V1, V2, V3, V4 and V5, and edges are E1, E2, E3, E4 and E5. Now let's see what is trivial graph. Now see what is trivial graph. A graph consisting only one vertex and no edge is called trivial graph. Here we can see it is only a vertex and there is no edge. So this type of graph is called trivial graph. Now the second one is null graph. So a graph consisting n vertices and no edge is called null graph. Here we can see in the example there are four vertices and no edge. So this type of graph is called null graph. Now let's see directed graph. A graph consists the direction of edges, then this graph is called the directed graph. Directed graph. A graph consists the direction of edges, then this graph is called directed graph. Here we can see in the example there is a graph in which V1, V2, V3 and V4 are the vertices and E1, E2, E4 are the edges of the graph. So in this graph the direction of edges are given. Direction of E1 is in the direction of vertices V2, vertex V2 and so on. Edges the direction of the edges is given in this graph. So this type of graph is called directed graph. Now second one is adjacent vertices. A pair of vertices U and V connected by an edge in a graph is known as adjacent vertices and have a common end vertex. The two vertices in this type of vertex, the two vertices are connected adjacently, end by end. Adjacent vertices. A pair of vertices U and V connected by an edge in a graph is known as adjacent vertices and have a common end vertex. Now the other type of vertices is isolated vertices. A vertex that is not adjacent to one another vertices is known as isolated vertices. Means they are not connected to each other. Let's see what is self-loop in a graph. An edge having the same vertex as both its end vertices is called a self-loop. Self-loop means an edge starts from one point and goes to the same point, means complete one loop. Here we can see there is edge E1 and vertex V and this is a complete loop. This edge starts from here and it completes the whole loop and ends to V only. And the second example also we can see there is a vertex V1, V2, V3 and edges E1, E2 and E3 and there is a self loop here at vertex V2. Now order of graph. So what is the order of graph? If a graph G have a finite number of vertices, then V of G denotes the number of vertices in the graph and known as the order of the graph. Means how can we find the order of the graph? By calculating the vertices, number of vertices in a graph. So this is the order. Now see what is simple graph. A graph that does not contain any self loop and multi-edge. Means the graph that does not contain any self loop is called a simple graph. Means it is simple graph. And what is multigraph? A graph that does not contain any self-loop but contains multi-edge is called a multigraph. Here we can see in this graph, it does not contain any self-loop and contains multi-edge, means there are so many edges v1, e1, e2, e3, e4, e5 and no self-loop. So this type of graph is called multigraph. The next type is pseudograph. A graph contain both self-loop and multi-edge is called a pseudograph. Means it can have many edges and a self-loop is called a pseudograph. Here we can see in the example, a graph is given where v1, v2, v3, v4 and v5 are the vertices and it has multi-edges e1, e2, e3, e4, e5, e6 and a self-loop at a vertex v1. There is a self-loop and so many edges. This type of graph is called pseudograph. Now let's see what is degree of vertex. So the degree of vertex v in a graph G written as dv is equal to the number of edges which are incident on v with self-loop counted twice. Is called the degree of vertex. Means we have to see the number of edges connected to that vertex. In this graph which is given here, the degree of v will be 2. Degree of v1, the vertex v1, it is connected to two edges, this and this. So degree of v1 will be 2 and degree of v2, I have told you that the self loop will be counted as 2. So the v2, there are two edges and we will count the self loop as 2. So there will be 4. Its degree will be 4. And the degree of v3, there are two edges connected to it. So degree of v3 will be 2. And the degree of v4, here we can see there are 3 edges connected to v4. This and this. So its degree will be 3. And the degree of v5, there are 2 edges, this and this. So degree of v5 will be 2. And the degree of v6, it is connected to 2 edges, this and this. So degree of v6 will be 2. Degree of v7, now v7 is connected to only one edge, so its degree will be 1. Degree of v8, it is not connected to any edge, so this is a vertex only, no edges are connected, so its degree will be 0. v8 degree is 0. Now the finite and infinite graph. A graph with a finite number of vertices as well as edge is called finite graph. Otherwise it is an infinite graph. Means if a graph is connected, there is a finite number of vertices in a graph as well as edges, then it is finite graph. We can see in the example, this is a finite graph because there are finite number of vertices and finite number of edges, so it is finite graph. And in this graph there are so many edges and it proceeds further, so there are infinite number of vertices and infinite number of edges. So this type of graph is called infinite graph. Complete graph. A simple connected graph is said to be complete if each vertex is connected to every other vertex. Means in this type of graph, the vertices are connected to each other. There are 2 examples. This vertex is connected to the next one, and in this triangle all the vertices are connected to each other. So this is complete graph. Regular graph. A graph G is said to be regular if every vertex has the same degree. If degree of each vertex of graph G is k, then it is called k regular graph. Means the vertex in the graph should have the same degree. All the vertex should have same degree. Here in this case, this vertex has two edges, so there is degree of this vertex is 2. Same as here, this vertex also has degree 2, this vertex also has degree 2. So all the vertex of the graph has degree 2. So this type of graph will be called two regular graph. Thank you.